And welcome everyone to tonight's presentation of OTF Connects, OSAPAC Resources, SAMR, and Digital Citizenship with Brenda Sherry and Peter Skillen, who are wonderful facilitators. And if you haven't have been fortunate enough to be in either a face-to-face or an online session or at a conference with them, then you're going to enjoy yourself tonight. And we're really thrilled to have all of you here on behalf of Sirius Gurhan, who's the administrator and facilitator of the OTF Connects program. We're always thrilled to have teachers coming out when it's at your own time, and you're here to learn more about what's available to you, especially from OSAPAC, and that's only going to help you in your teaching and your students' learning. So thank you very, very much. And I'm just going to flash over to our map of Ontario, show where we're all from tonight, and another great spread across the province. And now we're going to just pass things right on over to Peter and Brenda.
Thank you, Louise. I'm going to get started here. I always love it. It's been a while since we've done a webinar, but it's so awesome. You're such an expert at Blackboard, so thank you very much for your help with all these. I feel like I'm in good hands. And I also feel like even though it's really, really cold here in Guelph, where I'm from, we've got some people from even more north, so I hope you guys are keeping warm and enjoying the winter somehow. So what we'd like to do is Peter and I are going to introduce ourselves, but while we're doing that, if you could put in the chat what your role is at your school board or your school, and let us know too, are you working with other teachers to increase their capacity with technology when you're at your school, or are you kind of on your own with things? So go ahead and do that in the chat while I'm talking and Peter's talking. So my name's Brenda Sherry. I hesitate because I switched jobs this year. So I'm a vice principal at Upper Grand District School Board, and I'm a teaching vice principal. So after 6 years as a tech coach and 20 years before that as a classroom teacher, I'm back in the classroom now and really enjoying being at school. So I've done work with OTF and TLLP, the Teacher Learning and Leading Program, and ECHO and various other things and around the province with technology, so I love that. And these webinars are really a fun place to connect with other people that we meet face-to-face or in other webinars. So that's who I am. Peter, do you want to introduce yourself?
Hi, I'm Peter Skillen. Nice to see some of my old friends here and some new friends, I guess, from tonight. I started teaching in 1970 and taught grades 1 to 6 during first 13 years or so. Started working with grade 1s in computers, actually. Quite coincidentally, it was just I decided to take a computer course when I was at OSAPAC. It was my last course, my master's, and didn't know what I was going to do, and quite enjoyed getting started with some grade 1s and some really simple stuff right off the bat. In 1983, North York School District started a Computers and Education Center. And I became an instructional leader, they call them nowadays, and did that until about 2000 when I retired from Toronto District, and worked with a software company that actually created most of the logo computing languages that you might hear about, now that coding is coming back. Then in 2003, the YMCA of Greater Toronto started a secondary school and hired me to help with that. It's a school for kids who just don't fit into the regular large high schools, and I've been with the YMCA since 2003. Left the school, but still with the YMCA of Greater Toronto, working with staff to help them understand how learning is different in this day and age. And like Brenda, do a lot of conferences, work with OTF a bit, work with the ministry a little bit in their teacher leader learning and leadership program, I think it's called. Obviously my heart is with K-12 education, so that's why I'm here. So, oh, Jan, you loved the logo when it was on the icon. Indeed, we'll have to have a chat. Okay, over to you, Brenda.
All right, thanks. So our learning goals for today are really to walk you through the 2 new resources from OSAPAC that can help you with a lot of the teachers that are in your schools. Most of you in the chat indicated that you either help teachers informally at your school, or maybe you're a teacher librarian, or some of you are ed tech support team people. So you're really probably always looking for things that you can share with teachers. So we're not, we will touch on some of the elements of digital citizenship and some of the elements of SAMR, but our goal mostly is to give you some support resources that you can share with other people or use yourself for sure. And we really would like to encourage a lot of conversation, so really at any time please ask a question in the chat, or put up your hand, or just grab the mic. That would be great, because we'd love to hear what you're thinking as we go through this. So what you're looking at, I'm going to just flip back here. OSAPAC created a couple of postcards, and we'll share these links out to you, and also Louise is popping them in the chat, so thank you. But at the end of the webinar, you'll have a list of those links. And the two that we're going to talk about are the Digital Citizenship Project and the SAMR Project. And these both came from OSAPAC this year. Maybe what you could do is, if you use that check mark tool that Louise let us know about before, have you heard about SAMR before, yes or no? I mean, not SAMR, OSAPAC, sorry. Peter's going to assist Ava with some sound issues. So, okay, great. All right, so most people have heard about it. Awesome, thank you. I'll just do a really quick, brief outline for those of you who have not heard about it. So, the Ontario Software Acquisition Program Advisory Committee, what a crazy name, it's a big name, is a committee with a mandate to consult with education systems, to review software, make recommendations, and in the past and continuing, it maintained a database and helped send out software to school boards. That was originally the mandate. So while it is an advisory to the ministry, it isn't a branch of the ministry like we might normally hear about from curriculum and that kind of thing. So that's what the mandate is for. The committee members are folks like myself. I joined this past summer, so it's been almost a year that I've been on the committee. Educators, administrators, some of us are consultants or coaches. We have one person who's a CIO, Chief Information Officer for a school board, that's Waterloo. And then we have a couple of people who are education officers from the ministry. And in choosing these folks, they really try to balance it out for French and English and public and separate school boards and all areas of the province. So they really try to get a good sense of what's going on the pulse of the province. The projects that we are working on now, it's changing a little bit. It used to be just about procuring software, purchasing, and licensing it for your use in schools. And now what we're finding is it's more of a focus on digital resources in a more general sense rather than software in a more specific sense. So we decided to revamp the website. We decided to keep going with the licensing piece of good software for teachers and students in Ontario. But we have 3 projects that are on the go that are more around presenting resources to teachers. So you're going to hear about SAMR and digital citizenship today. And the other one that we are working on, Mark Carbone and Donna Fry, is Awesome MOOC. So Peter is going to give us a little walk through the website, the new website, and then talk about Awesome MOOC.
All right, so I think Louise, there's the link for osapac.ca. Louise is going to web tour us here, so I'll just explain this to you. If it doesn't show up on your screen for you, you might wish to just click on the link. We're not going to spend too much time here anyway at this point. So this is the home page for OSAPAC. So latest news, obviously, and a nice little welcome page. Up at the top, you'll see some topics. So home, and then there's resources, projects about OSAPAC, and French version as well. Under resources, if you just let your mouse hover over top of that, you will, if you're doing this in your own browser, if not, you would see a link to digital learning resources and a digital learning resources survey. Under projects, you would see the ones that Brenda has mentioned, Digital Citizenship, SAMR, and Awesome MOOC. Under resources, I'm just going to click on the Learning Resources survey. You should see another page then that allows you to give input as to mention the kinds of things you like and you would like to see funded and supported and made available through OSAPAC. This is really important. A lot of people do not do this. So if there's something that you would really, really like to see in terms of a digital learning resource, either a piece of software or a website that costs money, or some sort of learning materials that you might like produced, now that they're into that, this is the place to do it. So for example, Brenda and I have been logo lovers for many years, but logo is something that never made it onto OSAPAC in all these years. Now that coding has become important and relevant, well, it's always been important, but now it's become noticed, you will start to see recommendations from teachers for that to happen. So this is the way that you can give your feedback to the ministry, to OSAPAC, to get something new. So the other part is OSAPAC. So I'm just going to stop this and I'm going to go to the next slide. The Awesome MOOC is one of the projects. Now, this, you may have heard of MOOCs. Normally it means a massive open online course, but what OSAPAC has decided is to sort of have a takeoff on that. That's massive open online community, and it's really for those of you who are leading things in school. So system leaders, school leaders. In some ways it's focused on principals and administrators, but really it's open more for leaders in general. So they have Twitter chats every Tuesday night. There's a blog that they write, and they encourage you to write for, and discussion forums, and really, really trying to build the community. So it's very invitational. So you can see the blog address there and the Twitter handle. So feel free to check that out and encourage others to do that. Thank you. Brenda?
Thanks, Peter. I'm going to refer to Erin's question there. She's asking, is there a central list of software with passwords? Okay, so there is a central list of the software on the website that you just saw, the new revamp of the website under Digital Resources. Your passwords, etc., are kept by one person at your board who is an OSAPAC rep. So that is, in our board, that's an IT person. But what they do in our board is behind our portal, which is password protected for all of our staff, they've actually created a space where people can actually go there, get the passwords, and download the software. Because so much of our computers now, it's bring your own device. So we have students who, or we have teachers who want to use the software for teaching, and they can put it on their own laptops. Several of the titles are for students with a take-home license, so things like WordQ, and so you can give a student that download right onto their own device. There's only about 2 or 3 of those that are that way. But yes, Erin, so keep asking, and I agree with you. In my board, I spent 6 years tech coaching, and still I was asking about whether people knew about the great software that they're spending a lot of money to purchase, and they often didn't. So it's a work in progress, and this last year, a big part of what we're doing is trying to get the word out in things like this kind of webinar. So we'll keep at it. So the first one we'll talk about tonight is the Digital Citizenship resource, and we created these 4 icons to kind of give a sense to each of the categories that we created. So I'd love to know what your reaction is to the graphics, because we just chose them. So if any of them really bring to mind anything, go ahead and write in the chat what you think the connections are for you, or if there's one or two that you don't understand, or if you have questions about they don't make sense to you, you could let us know in the chat as well. So what happened was OSAPAC actually, okay, I hope I'm on the right side here. I think I am. Okay. OSAPAC identified this need for a resource for digital citizenship right from that survey we were talking about. So it came up again and again that people were interested and concerned about having their students doing the right things online, and so we chose that as one of our priorities for the last summer, and we started to get going with that. But one of the things we started to talk about was the fact that there is a lot of already created material online. And we discussed, like, what is the disconnect? Why do people, why are they having trouble either finding worthwhile resources or integrating those resources into their practice? And so we decided that probably we needed to offer some options for teachers that would be a little more connected to their curriculum. So it might not be enough to just say, you know, Media Smarts is out there and they've got lots of great resources, but teachers like to see how other teachers are using things. So that was the impetus for our the way that we created the resource. And yes, Melissa, you got it, right? Copyright one is about creation and copyright. Amanda's wondering about how the foot relates to communication, foot in mouth. And what we were thinking about there was that term, actually, like Peter printed out there, digital footprint. So we were kind of thinking of that Wi-Fi symbol, meaning, you know, you in the digital world and your presence there. So we'll see how you did.
I think foot and mouth is much better.
You want to talk about this one, Peter?
Sure. Yeah, so I mean, these are the four topics that this was actually mentioned in slide 2, but we'll revisit it here again, you know. So it's very hard to divide this up because it's become a very large topic over the years, and really it has a lot more to do with rights and responsibilities than it has to do with, bad behaviors. Don't do this and don't do that and don't do the other thing, which has been a big concern over the decades as we've moved forward with this stuff. So yeah, so I'm not going to detail these now. We'll see these as we go forward. But here's something I would like you to answer in the chat, or if you want to speak to it, you could do so. You know, what are your biggest issues and concerns related to digital citizenship within, any of these four categories, or something else that comes to mind?
In the chat there, Peter, Melissa, I don't know if you want to grab the mic and talk a little bit more about what you said, but you mentioned that students are going from passive consumers of media to producers, and that's a really important concept. Do you want to expand on that? How do you see that happening with your students?
Can you guys hear me?
Yes.
Okay. I just believe that there's been a big push from students, kind of like, especially with the Media Smarts report coming out about 10 years ago. Gaming was really big, so the websites that students would frequent all had to do with games, so they would play games and whatnot. And then fast forward 10 years ahead, it's all about social media. So they're frequenting social media sites. They want to put their work out. They want to produce content that people around the world really will take a look at and comment on. And our board is, it's been a Google Apps for Education board for a few years. And there's a really big push this year because Google Apps is so great for sharing, collaborating, and creating, right? So we're just kind of pushing that producers of content piece. I think it's really important for kids.
Great. Yeah. Kids are mashing things up, and it's just part of their culture to do that so easily, right? And I know that, and I can't remember what section it's in, but in the elementary curriculum there are 4 items, and 2 relate to consumption, like critical consumption, and 2 media literacy, and 2 relate to production. So that's embedded right in the Ontario curriculum, and it's very cool. And so safety and responsibility, both Amanda and Ken Walajit are mentioning appropriate use and behavior. So yeah, absolutely critical kinds of stuff. So there are the safety concerns, there's the bullying, the different kinds of things such as that. So
thanks for mentioning that Media Smarts report. I put in the recent one, and the link there is the 2015 one, so people who might be interested.
Yeah, that's great. Thank you. So these are some of the things that pop up to, where student data housed, and the whole issue of big data, which Brenda, does the resource cover that?
The resource from Media Smart, or this resource?
No,
not at all.
Okay, interesting.
Not really delving into big data, because for most of us, our boards are looking after that. For example, when Melissa mentions the Google Apps board, that's my board as well, and so we're reassured that our data, the kids' data, isn't going anywhere. Where we get into trouble is around those third-party applications, and so you're right. That might be a nice appendix to get into the resource.
Yes, I think so, and we know some folks could help out with that, don't we?
Yes, we do. Yeah.
So big data isn't mentioned, but obviously, things related to downloading music videos, as simple as just grabbing images, attention issues, addiction issues, bullying, and so forth. So these things are absolutely covered in the materials that you can glance through and work through that OSAPAC has put forward. So we're going to now just watch a little short video that Louise is going to queue up for us. And if it doesn't show up on your screen, you could go to this link and play it yourself. And if you could show us that green arrow.
Check mark.
Check mark. Thank you. When you're done, that'd be awesome. Should play automatically for most.
Okay. I still have the white box there, but I think most people may have finished. All right, thank you. Yeah, just before we move on, Melissa mentioned third-party applications. In our board, what we do is we have a whitelist of acceptable third-party applications, so that that students could get email verifications from them. Things like blogging, hosting sites that we approve, or voice threads, or things like that. So every board will handle that a little differently. And some boards put on their own extensions and apps for Chrome. Others give teachers some freedom. So it just depends on how your board's organizing it. So when you watch that little video, one of the things that the crowd that created the resource wanted to stress was that digital citizenship should be a real positive thing. That this is the real world for our students. This is the world they're going to grow up in. They're going to work and play online as well as face-to-face. And we saw citizenship being pretty much the same in the face-to-face space as it is in the online space, and that we could use what we do every single day with our kids and just extend that into the digital space and make them critical thinkers about what they're doing there. So this is the team. I'm going to tell you a little bit about the process, about how it came to be, and then I'll show you what it looks like with Peter's help here. So the boards were representative of quite a bit across the province. We had a lead for each of the divisions, primary, junior, intermediate, and senior, and 2 teachers in each of those groups. There were 3 OSAPAC members, myself, Donna Fry, and Karen Butler, who were working on this, and Jennifer from the 21st Century Learning Unit at the Ministry of Education. So it was a great bunch of eager people who got together the first week of July and started to write. You might want to check out the ministry site, actually. EduGains is where a lot of e-learning and OSAPAC and 21st Century and the EduGains people are trying to put things all in one place. So there is now a 21st Century Learning strand, and in that section you'll find lots of videos, well, not lots, but a few videos that they're trying to start to build about how teachers are using technology in schools. So for those of you who support other teachers, it would be great if you were to share some of those out. They have really excellent practice that's happening in our schools, so that's nice to see. And what the team decided to do was they worked on those 4 categories, looking at the way other digital citizenship resources were organized. They came up with these 4 main categories: critical thinking and information literacy, creation and credit, presence and communication, and health and protection. And what we thought we would create is something that was cross-curricular, something that went from primary to secondary, and that would include two sections, a resource list and classroom connections. So that's kind of repetitive. I'll just go quickly through there. If you have a look at this one, and Peter, are you jumping in on here? I'm sorry.
Yeah, that's okay.
I'm a little off.
Yeah, I know your systems aren't working that well tonight. It's computer systems, not your brain. So the critical thinking and information literacy is one of these sections, obviously. So this whole notion of like what is effective strategies to search for information, what is the language of the web, the grammar of the web. I know Alan November has some great materials on that from years gone by that would help kids with figuring, well, help us all actually thinking about that. The Critical Thinking Consortium, and you can get stuff through the OTF website on that, really has some good stuff related to using credible online resources. This is, of course, in addition to the materials that are in the package. And critical thinking, obviously. And then, inquiry model. what a surprise. Look, we're talking about inquiry. So there's lots of stuff on inquiry and inquiry models. A lot of it has come out of the library work these years. Creation and credit is the other section, and this has been sort of addressed tonight. So this is where it's a matter of understanding that things, just because they're on the web doesn't mean you can download them. This is where Creative Commons is awesome, and you'll get to see that. If you're not familiar with Creative Commons licensing, it is brilliant and wonderful to use and work with kids. And distribution of stuff that has been made and consequences of that unauthorized distribution. So it's really something that can get started right away in very early years. Brenda?
Oh, forgot to click my button. Thank you, Peter. So one of the things we really very much wanted to focus on there was where it says a digital citizen is one who. And so rather than take that position of fear, you know, the resource, it comes from a position of very positive participation in the online world. And I think that just is very much like what we do with our kids in our day-to-day life, face-to-face, is we want to really think about how do we want to be, as opposed to do not do this, do not do that. So that was really the committee that got together to make this. They really wanted to come from that stance. And we had a couple of teacher librarians on the team too, so they've had a lot of more experience than a lot of us in this area, and already sort of came from that lens. Any questions about those? I know this is quite a quick overview, but I want to get into the resource. There's the health and protection section, and this one kept coming up over and over for us because of the things that you folks have mentioned, the safety, just good health around balance in your life and screen time and outdoor time and that kind of thing. So it was really important that a lot of our lesson activities relate to health and protection. So I think it's something you can't just do a one-off lesson. This has to be a part of all of your teaching almost all of the time. Great, I'm glad to see you have a teacher librarian session coming up. That's awesome. So here's what we've got, a resource list and classroom connections. So I want to show you first that each category, so for example, what we're looking at here is health and protection. So each category from the divisions will have resources, and then we'll have a classroom connection. And that includes 2 authentic tasks, more like your lesson plan kind of idea, although not exactly a lesson plan, and you'll see what I mean in a second. Each of the lessons on the website will include the division that it belongs to. You'll see that there's many subject areas represented. It's not always media arts or media literacy. It can be a wide range of different things. And what we decided to do was link each of the sections at the top of each of the classroom connections. So if you want to just read about the authentic task to get ideas there, you can click there. If you want to see what is the piece around digital citizenship, you can look there. If you want to look at what the technology that is being recommended in the lessons is all about, you just click technology integration and you'll get other resources there, and then curriculum and so on. So we tried to make it very accessible and quick because we wanted various jumping in points. We realized that some teachers need just a few ideas that they can put into their toolkit. They're pretty much good to go around digital citizenship. Other people are just starting, so they want things laid out a little more in a little more detail. So this is an example of what an authentic task would look like. And I'm being sad there for Eva because she's just saying in the chat that she doesn't have any teacher librarians in her board. That's very sad. Students, so for example, in this one, students take nature photos, and they're going to be looking for some of the principles and techniques of visual arts that they've been working on in their classroom. Then they're going to learn about Creative Commons licensing for those photos. And then they're going to use their images to create. So just like we were talking about before, Melissa, I believe, talked about becoming a producer, not just a consumer. So they're not just going to, they're going to actually create pictures and then share them in a digital way. So it's licensing and crediting work and then understanding the art. So when you tour a classroom connection, it gives you a little piece around what the digital citizenship element is. So for this one, it's all about Creative Commons licensing around your personal work. And I think that, I know Peter and I have had a lot of discussions about this, but once students start to actually license their own work, they really get it. They understand that that belongs to them, just like all those images that they see on Google belong to someone else. So it's a really worthwhile process for students. And then what we've done is connected it to the elements of the creation and credit section of the resource. So that's outlined there for you. And then if you were to click Digital Citizenship Resources, there is help for you. So if you're not sure what Creative Commons is, you would find links to different things that you could use. Little videos, wikis where other teachers have been placing things. And this is where we were almost like curating some of the good resources that we found online into more specific categories for folks. And then there's a technology integration piece. So for in this unit, or this lesson, this classroom connection, sorry, and I shouldn't keep calling it a lesson because we've had a hard time distinguishing between a lesson plan and what we wanted, something more open, which was, that's why we called it a classroom connection. So in here, students will use a digital camera to take, of their choice, to take nature photos. So that could be the camera, but it could also be the phone, the iPad, and all those other devices that kids are using for photos. And then they're going to use a sharing site of some kind or a website to publish their photos online. So if you needed help with that, you might click on this section, and there you go. You'll have all kinds of ideas for how to find more information about kinds of tools to use. We tried to make this comprehensive because we know that in some boards you wouldn't be allowed to use Flickr, for example. Some boards would have Picasa, others wouldn't. Some would have to use a third-party application or store their photos in another way. And so that's a bit of a glossary for folks there too, so that they can get information. And then the curriculum content piece is where we actually looked at expectations that we would tie to these connections, the classroom connections. So you might come in based on curriculum. And again, we provided resources. And then the other element of each of the classroom connections will be teaching and learning strategies. So these are kind of the extra tips that you might need before you could launch into this classroom connection. So you might have to explore some of the photo sharing options and licensing options for intellectual property. You have to sort of get yourself familiar with how Creative Commons works. You might have to work a little bit in the front load a little bit about the basics of digital photography with your students. Keep that in mind. You might also talk about other kinds of intellectual property that students might be using, like music, which I find is a big one. Students are really, and teachers actually, I must tell you, teachers and students taking a lot of video and music without permission, so they have to learn a little bit more about that. And then next steps are sort of how would you extend this classroom connection and to go a little further. Okay, so each of the classroom connections are organized in that way. That's the classroom connection piece. And then there's the resource list. And boy, did we have a great time. First of all, I should ask if there are any questions about the classroom connections piece. You will jump in if there are any questions there, Peter, please. I don't think so, so I'm going to go on and just finish this up. So then we have a resource list. So maybe you don't really need to jump in with classroom connections and go through the curriculum areas. Maybe you know what you're up to. You just want some new resources. And then you can have a look at this resource list, which is broken down by all 4 of the categories, and then primary, junior, intermediate, and secondary. There's a bit of overlap for some of them, but we had a great time doing this because, of course, the team is very well versed in a lot of digital resources, but we were finding and sharing all kinds of things. So I've gone back to this resource list very, very many times. Like, for example, right now I'm doing teaching some online safety with grades 3 to 5. And there is Media Smart Cyber Pigs Adventures. My kids are just really loving those. So that was something that I just found on the resource list and was able to quickly access it and integrate it into what I was doing. So that is basically how each of the digital citizenship categories is organized. And I hope that sort of gives you an idea of how you might share that out with the teachers. Any thoughts about questions or comments? You'll want to get to the OSAPAC site and just browse around because I'm just showing you snippets that we pulled out when we were organizing this. Okay, shall we move on to SAMR, Peter?
That sounds good. Oh, are you waiting for me to introduce this?
I could start, or you could start, whatever you like.
Well, I guess the question really is for you to think about how differently kids are learning as a result of, technology in your school or classroom. Can you just pop some ideas into the chat, or if you'd like to grab the mic just to answer that, like how differently are your kids learning as a result of technology in your school or classroom? This has been a question that we've been asking ourselves now for, well, in my case, a long time, like a few decades. Alternatively, what are you seeing your kids using technology for in school? So I see some folks typing there. Anybody want to grab the mic? We're being real shy this evening. Students experimenting, expert in certain areas, more novice stage. Oh, Amanda, you're speaking my language. Analyze, making infographics, more engaged. Many who find owners like long pieces, they do well. Google for Ed, collaboration, sharing and comments. Create, sharing student work, dig into Instagram, Minecraft games, exactly, global citizenship kind of stuff. So it's interesting that the chap Ruben who developed this, Punta Dura, came up with it, because one of the challenges that he's had in trying to get people to understand this is that people are judgmental. So when you dig deeply into it, and I've been very, very critical of this model right from day one until I had an opportunity, well, for two reasons, but until I had the opportunity to actually watch and get more deeply into actually what he says about it, and how he talks about not being judgmental, and how he ties it to other learning theory and so forth. So this was very useful to me, because when I looked at it, I thought, oh my goodness, now we're going to have people thinking very superficially about substitution, augmentation, modification, redefinition. Is it not obvious that, we just shouldn't do this, shouldn't do that, we might do this then, whatever? And aren't there times, in fact, that maybe it's a good idea just to have a really good substitute that's much more effective, for example. So what I'm going to do now is just show you this little video on the next slide, and then we'll get into a discussion about it. So again, if this does not work for you, start automatically for you, please click on the link that I'm putting in. There it is. Louise put it in. She beat me this time. Very good. All right, once again. You see a web tour of this, and then click the green arrow or green check mark when it's done.
I popped us back to the slides already, folks. Sorry if that interrupted your video. Another video queued up right away for me, which I assumed meant that yours was going to queue up as well.
Thank you, Louise. I think pretty much everybody's finished. Oops. Peter, are you okay if I just start here before you talk about the next one?
Oh, go for it, man.
Okay. So I think the things that Peter and I loved about this video are similar to what you were saying. First of all, it explains SAMR really well. That the fact, and this would be a great video for you to share with your staff as well, or those other teachers you're working with if they're not, if they don't know what SAMR is. But it really explains that we can use technology in so many different ways, and like you guys pointed out in the chat, it's not that we're valuing, it's not that we're devaluing that substitution. Sometimes that's where we jump in. And when I have a new tool that's brand new to me, and especially if I haven't got advice from other people, I'm playing around with that tool, and it's going to take me a little while to get up to some higher level uses for that tool. And it's also going to, until I can imagine other activities to do with something when I've played with it, then I have to be familiar in order to get creative and that kind of thing with some tools. The other thing, sorry, go ahead.
The other thing is, if I think about paper and pencil and writing, and just writing on a word processor without using outliners, without using a lot of the other features, any collaborative features, or blah, blah, blah. I'm a collaboration lover, but I'm also one for reflective thinking. And honestly, I would prefer a pencil and paper many times over a word processor, because a word processor has some features, does not have some features that pencil and paper have. The ability to scratch out, rewrite, write in the margins, flip around, and then have an audit trail really nicely so that I can say, oh, I scratched that out, maybe I should put that in. Because once you erase it on the computer, yeah, you can recover versions and that and the other thing, but honestly, it's not necessarily as good. So we make some real assumptions about digital technologies compared to other technologies that we have used in the past. So I think the critical point for me is what those kids say: it promotes reflective teaching. So the notion again that you really just need to, this raises the opportunity to think about what you're doing. That's what I love about it. Thanks, Brenda.
Thank you. And I totally agree with you, Peter, and when I see the discussion that's happening in the chat right now, I think that's the point of this, is that we're thinking about, oh, at what level are we using this technology? And if it's something, for example, what Ken Waljit has said, if the substitution is the piece that a student needs and it involves a kind of tool that can augment something, such as I think of word prediction and how that transforms how a student can write, then maybe that's where you're at, and that's a great place for that student to be. And then when you get above the line, as they referred to in the video, there might be a little bit of a gray area around what's redefinition and what's modification, because I tended to agree with Erin when I saw the video when they created a multimedia piece that persuaded. I might not have called that the R. I might have called that the M. And R, to me, might have been taking the sharing of that project that those students made and actually take it somewhere that would persuade or make something happen. The idea that social action could happen, students could send this to other people in the community, adults, etc., to get something to happen. So that, to me, that would be even a higher level for that task. So, you know, that's the thing. We're actually just going to be thinking more about how we're using our technology and why we might be using it. So in terms of what OSAPAC created, a couple of the members went to ECHO and we sat in at Jim Cash's wonderful presentation. We've linked his Prezi there because you might want to take a look at it. And what we had been seeing a lot are people who are taking the apps and just putting them into these levels. And again, it's exactly what you folks have been saying in your chat. You know, it depends on, so I'm going to just look in here. It depends on iBooks there. It's put into a substitution level, but it would depend perhaps on how I use Pages or iBooks, whether that would be substitution or something else. You know, so we can't just clearly say that we can place these apps in certain categories. We have to think about how we're using them. And so in the summertime when we had our 3-day meeting, we thought, well, what if we would consider some of the OSAPAC software with the lens of SAMR model? Would this help teachers understand different ways that they can use some of the OSAPAC tools? And how could we model some use? In other words, get some teachers sharing how they're using these tools in different ways. How does that help a teacher who might be starting out or who could jump in at different entry points? So that's what we were concerned with. We wanted it to be really accessible for all levels of teachers, all levels of comfort level, I guess, teachers' comfort level with technology, and we wanted it to be reflective. And what we found was that SAMR does scaffold some ideas of technology use. So if I'm just starting out, I might take one little step. If I'm really comfortable with technology, I might just get some new ideas for how to redefine some of the tasks. I might jump right to M and R. And you know what? We really value and recognize that wherever you are is your starting point, and that's A-OK. And as you guys have mentioned, sometimes you're going to do some substitution type things. Sometimes you're going to not. So like it's just okay to be where you are, and that's what we wanted it to be, a very positive resource. And we know some people who are afraid to try with technology because it fails, or you know, they have trouble problem solving. So we wanted to show them some examples of things that teachers are really using in their classrooms. It's iterative. I think we've talked about most of these things here that changes the process. So what we did was in the fall of 2013, we were planning the project, and we had a call for writers across the province, and we had lesson writing from March to May. These folks were given some release time to create their lessons and then share them back with us. They also had to include a little bit of a reflection piece, and that could be video or written. So we wanted them to either respond to the software they were using or to the idea of SAMR. And we have some examples that I would suggest. Bye, Eva. I know you had to go early, so good luck driving. What we're going to suggest is that we go to the SAMR site, and I'm going to pop that link in the chat in a second. And I think my colleagues here, Louise and Peter, will have to remind me a little bit. We're not going to web tour this one. We're going to ask people to go to the site in the link, and we are going to give you some time to browse through the lessons. So what you'll do is you'll scroll down to the bottom of the page and you'll see a chart, and it will have educators' names from various boards, the subject area, the software, and the grade level that they were working at. And then that should open up a PDF that you can have a look at and see the organization of the SAMR lessons. So let's take about 5 or 7 minutes for you to do that, and maybe somebody could put the timer on, and I'm going to grab the link. Actually, I'm going to just take one more second here and get the actual link to the SAMR page, unless one of you already have it.
It's already in the chat there, Brenda, and I did put it in the web tour if people just want to take a peek in there, but opening it using the link from the chat will be more functional for you when you want to browse some of those PDF teacher resources. So as Brenda said, click on the link and then scroll down.
Okay, so I hope you had a chance to look at least one. It's hard to really walk you through all these, but what we wanted to share with you was a little bit of an idea of what SAMR is, a great video that you could share with your teachers, and then a variety of kinds of software, of the OSAPAC software, and how teachers in our province are taking that software and looking at it in a reflective way. What was kind of funny was that when these folks started to do this, they could all figure out the substitution one pretty easily, and augmentation, and then it was really, they were really, once they got to that level, you know, it's easy to get to R once you've had a little bit of experience with this, because often the R is around sharing it out, or the collaboration piece, or adding some more creativity, or making it a more authentic project. So, you know, they all seem to write back with the same wonderings about whether they got the levels quite right, and we said over and over that it was a process, so it didn't really matter if they weren't exact. It's more of how they can look at pushing their practice and using the technology in new ways. And Erin, that's the thing, I guess. Does the technology afford new activities that you could never do before you had that technology? So, you know, I think especially about Google Earth or those kinds of things, Tinkerplots, where it's dynamic software, and often what the teachers were doing in these lessons is combining the software with something else. So, for example, in Tinkerplots, you know, maybe tweeting out some surveys to get the real data for your students, and there's a redefinition, because in a way, I mean, you could survey your school, you could survey your classroom, that kind of thing to get data, but now we can go wider and beyond that. And so sometimes the redefinition stage involves not just one kind of software, but others. There's also the videos as a reflection piece. Most people did that. Some wrote in some text. So hopefully that you find that helpful if you want to share some lessons with others or even just look for yourself. What I loved doing was there were ideas in the R stages that I hadn't thought about, so that was really cool for me, and I'm pretty well versed with this software. The last one that we haven't included here because it was so brand new is Mindomo. It's a graphic organizer software that's been recently licensed by OSAPAC, and when you get to that osapac.ca site that we shared with you earlier, we've put tutorials on there and that'll get you started using that. It's a great tool as well. So there's also an OTF webinar coming up that Peter and I are going to do to really get your account started and get you actually doing some things with Mindomo. So join us for that if you're interested. Peter?
So now it's up to you. What might be your takeaways from this evening's session? What might be your next steps? That's really what you need to ask yourself now and what we're asking you to share, either in the chat or grab the mic. Go for it.
I'm curious to know if anyone has a particular activity that they're doing with their students right now or recently or thinking about it in the very near future, and if you want to kind of share that activity and have a little conversation about what some of those augmentation or redefinitions might look like for that activity.
Mm-hmm. So Aaron, you're going to learn to code, how to create applets, okay? Go logo, go scratch, go turtle art. Awesome.
And stay tuned to your OTF Connects calendar for early fall. We will be having a session on all those things that Peter just mentioned before.
Yes, indeed. It's coming. Okay, I'm just looking at these great ideas.
Yeah, me too.
Nice. So
great stuff.
Writing together. Yeah, I'm just looking at what Melissa's written down. So that collaboration where you can actually create something together. I mean, we could have done that before. Yes, indeed, we could have. I mean, I did snail mail connections with my students, but there's something about having that actual collaborative document going that redefines the task, for sure.
I have a question about that. I know sometimes with my own kids, they might be doing something in school that doesn't begin with the collaborative component, but students work on something on their own and then they come together as groups. And I'm wondering what thoughts are around that in relation to that redefinition or any of those other components of the framework. Does that help foster collaboration if students might have already started with something in their mind, or does that get a much more diverse conversation going? Like, what's your thoughts on that?
Is that to any of us, Louise?
Yeah, that would be to anyone, but if you have some thoughts, I'm just kind of wondering, do you get the most out of collaboration when you begin with collaboration? Or can you kind of move into that once kids have some of their own ideas thought out to share?
Well, my personal opinion on that, and I know Peter will want to weigh in, is that right now, collaboration, and I should just hand it over to you, Peter, because I know what you're going to say. But I'll tell you that I find a lot of kids need some background information. They need some background content before they can really be contributors in a positive way. So to me, we can't throw out all of the other things we do to build background knowledge and get kids sharing information the way we always do before they start to collaborate. I don't think that, I don't want to take Peter's words here, so what I'm going to say is just what he's going to say, so I'm going to turn it over to him.
Can you repeat the question? Seriously.
I was kind of wondering, Peter, if and Brenda's got her thoughts there, whether if you're doing a collaborative activity with students, do you get more out of it when students start right from the beginning collaborating together, or do you allow students to kind of do some of their own thinking first and then come together?
Okay, so it's a very complex thing, right? I think one of the things we often do is look for, sort of a yay, nay, or a yes, do it this way or do it that way. I really think, like we just said with the SAMR stuff, we have to look at each individual circumstance, decide what your desired outcomes are for the situation, and then take it from there. So, what's the level of expertise of a particular child or the group in the topic at hand? Are they at the beginning of the task, or is this the middle of a project and it's the first, the first day? Is it the third day? Is it whatever? Honestly, right now, this collaboration thing is driving me nuts, right? And the reason we're so into collaboration is not necessarily driven by deep pedagogical reasons. It's driven by the tool. And so there's that old saying that comes back to us, you have a hammer now, everything looks like a nail. Because we have tools that are collaborative. Facebook, Twitter, everything knows what you're clicking. Everybody's offering you up connections and links and people to connect with, and hey, why don't you be friends with this person, and most collaboration is not very deep. Most collaboration that occurs is either social or it's curation, and then there's this negation of individual work as if it's a bad thing. So I would recommend folks to read something like From Campfire to Holodeck by David Thornburg. So he talks about 4 metaphors, talks about the campfire as sort of the place where one listens to a person of wisdom, sort of the lecture format. And then off they go to the watering hole. That's the place where